Hey there, this is Angel Donovan with another episode of Dating Skills Podcast. Today we have DJ Fuji from Tao of DJ Fuji. And DJ Fuji has a bit of a different take on the whole world of dating skills and how to teach them in particular. And a lot of his clients tend to be guys who are like struggling. They haven't had girlfriends in the past, so it's not like they want to have really, really crazy high ambitions of like threesomes or out of world stuff there. What they just want to get is from somewhere where they haven't had much of a dating life before, just to where they're having a great dating life. DJ, great to have you here.
Thank you, man. Glad to be here.
Cool. So let's just jump straight into it. I know that one of the things that you really have that kind of had a different take on is you look at fundamentals versus a lot of the kind of techniques that we see talked about by a lot of the gurus. Could you outline like what are fundamentals? What are you talking about when you say fundamentals?
Well, primarily, I think the main emphasis that I teach is, and some of the techniques are the fundamental techniques, but it's more focusing, like if we say, take a look at a sport like basketball, focusing more on the dribbling, the footwork, the passing, the shooting, versus the half-court shot, versus the sky hook shot, versus the flashy things that they look really cool, but they don't actually win games. So when you're talking about dating, the fundamentals are things like body language, things like confidence, things like eye contact, the things like physical contact, the ability to hold a conversation. Now, the ability to hold a conversation, everyone seems to think that, like most people want to believe they can do that, but it's actually a more difficult thing than most people realize. And that's when you get guys that freeze up, that don't know what to say. That comes down to just social skills. And in particular, in a cold approach scenario, particularly advanced social skills in order to keep a conversation going with someone who's probably nervous talking to you and being able to continue to do that. So those types of things, while they're not sexy necessarily in a flashy sales page type way, those are things that actually get you real world results. So that's what I focus on.
Okay, right. So this doesn't tend like, as you say, when people read about this stuff, like holding a conversation, doesn't sound really exciting or something you want to learn.
Yeah.
And it's not really very motivating. But what I like about what you say is that it's really fundamentally important. Like it's really the first step. If you can't hold a conversation, then you can't do anything else afterwards, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's just like in the basketball analogy of passing or shooting. If you can't do those basic things, then it doesn't matter how good your sky hook shot is, because what ultimately wins games, and in this case, what ultimately gets you results, are those baseline fundamentals. And you have to have them because everything else builds upon those fundamentals.
Okay, so for guys listening to this who may have this problem, but maybe they're not so aware of it, or sometimes we try to tell ourselves we don't have this basic problem, right? We want to kind of study more advanced stuff. What would you say, like, how would you know if this is like the main thing you're falling down on, and you really need to focus on this fundamental before like getting into anything more complicated?
I would say the majority of people that get into this really need to start with the fundamentals. If you got into this and you weren't particularly naturally talented, or you didn't kind of pick this up and run with it, like if you got into this, you read a few lines, you went out and you instantly started getting dates, then your fundamentals are probably pretty strong because that's what's carrying you.
Yeah.
But if you're getting into this and you're struggling a little bit, if you run out of things to say often, if you don't know how to escalate, let's say you go on a date with a girl, or even you're cold approaching, or you're talking to a woman and you don't know how to touch her, or you're not sure how or when to kiss her, or you don't know what to do next, or you're kind of nervous and you don't know what to say, your mind goes blank type things. If you're experiencing those, then those are symptoms of just kind of a lack of fundamentals. And there's nothing to be ashamed of with the fundamentals, because I'll be the first to tell you that I was one of the worst guys ever with the fundamentals. I started with nothing. I started with such a lack of social skills that at 20 years old, I'd never held a girl's hand, much less dates, sex, or anything else. I would have been happy just to have held a girl's hand. So I started from nothing, but what that allows me to do is know where guys are when I train them. I know exactly where they are in that path and what they need to do to get good.
Okay, so for a guy who's got this stumbling block of just talking, basically maintaining a conversation, what are the first steps, and how long does it take him to get over that, would you say, normally?
It really depends on where he's starting, because some guys are starting and they're kind of nervous and they run out of things to say, and they're starting, but they're fast learners, or maybe they started and they have other things going for them in their lives, and they're naturally funny, they're just kind of nervous. For them, they have to get over the nerves. For, say, where I started, I had the nerves, but I didn't know how to make a conversation. I just didn't know how to carry a conversation even with guys. I didn't obviously know how to be funny. I didn't know any of that stuff. So there was so many more concepts to learn that, the learning curve is going to be different. I'd say for most guys to pick up the fundamentals, you're talking somewhere between, on a low end of 6 months to a year, on the high end of maybe 2-3 years. And really, and that may sound like a lot, but it's pretty reasonable when you factor in that what you're really doing here is you're taking 20 to 30 years of social skill development and you're cramming it into a year or two. And that's why you have to be dedicated to it. But if you think about it, if you could do that with anything else, that would be absolutely amazing. And even when we do it here, sometimes you look at the difficulty of what you're trying to do and the complexity, and you're like, that's amazing. 30 years of experience into 2 years, and you're right back as if you've been doing this for 30 years.
Right. I mean, it sounds like kind of crazy to say, like, maintaining a conversation is hard. But when you put it into that perspective, then you can see that, if you've always been shy and you haven't been someone who's been like talking with people a lot, then you just lack so much of that experience. So that sounds kind of demotivating though. 2 to 3 years, are those, like, where are those kind of guys starting from that have to work for that long? And is there a difference in the way the guys learn, which is making the difference to how long they learn? So, are they learning in a way that's holding them back in some ways, which is making it, this 2 to 3 year job?
I would say those are rates based on a guy putting in the necessary effort, a guy getting good coaching, a guy having good direction. Without those things, like if a guy kind of he doesn't really put a lot into it, or he kind of does it halfway, or he's not really disciplined or dedicated, or he doesn't have the coaching, he doesn't have the drive, or maybe he doesn't have the direction, those 2-3 years end up being 5, 6, 10 years. Most of the time, they don't even get that far because guys get frustrated and they drop out. And if you look at any group of guys that are trying to get good at this, whether they're a local support group, a meetup group, a layer, anything like that, you're going to see a lot of people drop out. And it's just because it's so hard to put all of those things together if you don't have that direction, that drive, that discipline. And so I mean, I know, Angel, that you work a little bit in fitness too, and the same thing. You see people that join the gym in January, and what happens by March? The gym's empty. And in 2 short months, all these people that have these resolutions now completely drop the ball on that. And I think a lot of people look at learning dating and they're like, oh, so many people drop out. Well, that's the same thing no matter what you do. Anytime you want to do something big, you want to accomplish something big, you have big goals, you're going to have most of the people drop out. And it's sad, but it's true. The great thing is that it means that if you are, you are disciplined, you are dedicated to that, you really want this, then you can do it because you don't have that much competition. All you have to do is not drop out when everyone else is dropping out. You got to push a little bit harder, and you got to push yourself and have that discipline. You have to make sure you have that direction and know where you're going, have that good coaching and stuff, and you can do it. And I think that's the same in business. It's the same in sports. It's the same in fitness, and it's the same in dating.
Right. And this is, this is interesting stuff. And I wanted to do a little segue here because we're talking about motivation and willpower, right? And, basically, like, I want to achieve a goal in my life, and I've got this much force and energy to get it done and to be persistent no matter, the failures. And, obviously it's going to be hard at the beginning, or it's not going to be so much fun, right? Where do you think this is just related to something that you can basically tell yourself, no, I can listen to this podcast and I can say, okay, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to be super motivated about this and I'm going to stick to it for 6 months. Or, like, I know this is getting, a bit advanced here, but I kind of think it's important. Or do you think, like, there's underlying other factors that help you to make, basically put in the required force and keep up with it over time? Now, I'm thinking a bit, I know you talked a bit about life style coaching, so I'm thinking a bit along those lines. And what kind of supports you to keep that level of motivation up and, to actually push through